Alright, how's everybody doing out there in Math Magic Land? Today, Miss Rem's going to take you on a small journey to tell you the difference between factoring and solving. So go ahead, sit down, and let's get into this topic that confuses a lot of math peoples out there. Now, the first thing you want to do is note that factoring involves expressions. Now, what are expressions? Oh, they're things like, I don't know, 9x squared minus 4. Or maybe you have 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. It could be any letter that you want. Whereas solving would be something similar, only if you had 9x squared minus 4, that would be set equal to 0. Because why? That is an equation, because you see that thing right there? That's called an equal sign. Solving involves equations. So if you had 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0, you could solve that equation. Expressions cannot be solved. They can only be factored. So let's do two quick examples. Now the first example is going to involve factoring and solving the expression 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. Now if you were to factor that, there's a lot of different things you can do to factor it, but then when you're all done, that would factor into 2x plus 3 and x plus 4. Now, how can you check to be sure that you factored correctly? Well, I'm glad you asked. You're going to have to use what's called the distributive property, or a lot of people like to say FOIL. But what you would do is multiply 2x times x. That gives you 2x squared. Multiply 2x times 4. And that gives you plus 4, or 8x. And then you're going to multiply 3 times x, all right, so that's 3x. And then lastly, you're going to multiply 3 times 4 and come up with 12. If you combine your middle terms, you'll end up with 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. Oh my gosh, that's the same thing that's up there. So yes, we factored that expression correctly. So the correct factoring of 2x squared plus 11x plus 12 is simply 2x plus 3 times the quantity x plus 4. Now that's as far as you can go with factoring. You can't do anything else. That's it, you're done. Now, solving is going to look very similar, except this time, each factor, when you write it, do not forget to put down your equals 0. You've got to make sure that you include that equals 0. It doesn't just go out to lunch, disappear, and then forget to come back. So be sure to keep that in there. The next thing you do, because you're a great math student, is you write down each one of those factors and set that factor equal to 0. The next thing you do is you solve each one of those equations. So I have 2x equals negative 3, and I'll get x equals negative 3 over 2. That's one possible solution. And then when I subtract 4, I'll get x equals negative 4. And that will be one possible solution. So now how do I know that my solutions are correct, that they're not extraneous? Well, what you do is you plug the answer back into the original problem. When you do that, if you get a result of 0, then that is the correct solution. If you do not get a result of 0, then that answer is what's called an extraneous solution. But more on those types of things in other videos. For now, we're just focusing on the difference between factoring and solving. One more example coming at you. Now here, in this factoring example, this is going to use a technique that people like to use all the time, called factor by grouping. Now what factor by grouping does is it's going to take these two here together, and it's going to say, well, what's the greatest common factor between those two terms? So x squared is the greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor out an x squared, and then I'd have left just an x plus 2. Now, on the other piece of it, this minus x minus 2, there isn't really a greatest common factor, but I want you to look at the two terms, or the two products that we wrote previously in yellow, the x squared and then the quantity x plus 2. I want to end up with an x plus 2 again. So over here, I'm going to factor out a negative 1 and then multiply that by x plus 2, and that would be the same thing as the expression above. Now, when you're going to use factor by grouping, this is the part that'll drive a lot of math teachers nuts. Please be sure you include the plus sign or the minus sign. Now, what you're going to do next is you're going to take this x squared and this minus 1, and you're going to put those two guys together. So I'm going to have x squared minus 1. And then the two factors that are the same, well, you're just going to write that one time. So x plus 2. Now you can continue to factor this, and you're a good math student. You should recognize x squared minus 1 will factor into x plus 1 times the quantity x minus 1. And then lastly, we're going to have x plus 2. So the correct factorization of x cubed plus 2x squared minus x minus 2 is simply x plus 1, x minus 1 times x plus 2. That's it. Now solving is going to be a little bit different. Solving is going to be a lot bit different. So now when you go to solve this equation, again, you can use factor by grouping. So that's fine. Go ahead and do that. Factor it down, break it down as far as you can using factoring. The x plus 1 times quantity x minus 1 times quantity x plus 2 equals 0. And remember, you're a good math student, so you're always going to write down that equals 0 part. It's not going to be missing. Then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. That's it. So hopefully by watching this video, you now understand the difference between factoring an expression and solving an equation. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helps you solve some of your mathematical dilemmas that you may be facing either now or in the future. Peace out.